Hello, ako po si Paterno Esmaquel at ito ang Newsbreak Chats. Dito sa Newsbreak Chats, dadalhin namin kayo sa likod ng kamera habang tinatalakay natin ang mga pinakamaiinit na issue sa nakalipas sa 2 linggo. Ang topic natin ngayon, nako, ang China umeeksena na naman. Nabalitaan nyo siguro yung laser incident sa West Philippine Sea. Yan ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon kasama ang Foreign Affairs and Security Reporter ng Rappler, si Sofia Tomacruz. Nagbabalik sa Newsbreak Chats. Welcome back, Sofia.
Hello, Paterno.
Welcome back sa ating dalawa. Foreign Affairs and Security na naman ang topic natin. Sofia, bago natin pag-usapan, in-analyze itong mga nangyari, bigyan mo muna kami ng basics. Ano ba nangyari dito sa West Philippine Sea? Itong laser incident involving the Chinese Coast Guard and the Philippine Coast Guard.
Right, okay, sige. So, siguro recap muna, no? Last week, so mga Feb 14, the Philippine Coast Guard disclosed that a Chinese Coast Guard vessel pointed a military-grade, yun yung ginamit nilang term, military-grade laser at the BRP Malapascua last February 6. So, what happened was, if you can see there in the video, what happened was that the Chinese Coast Guard, which we know is always present now in the South China Sea and including the West Philippine Sea, they pointed a military-grade laser, and what that did to the crew of the BRP Malapasco was it caused temporary blindness for 10 to 15 seconds. That was also accompanied with yung mga actions na ginagawa nila dati pa. Unsafe maneuvers, radio challenges. But what set this particular incident apart is that, well, it's the first known incident of this kind, at least done to a Philippine vessel. And also, the fact that it caused harm to crew of the Philippine Coast Guards, of the Philippine Coast Guard. So, that was what was considered provocative or was considered provocative in this account because something could have happened at sea at that time. If you recall, just imagine when you're out there, if you were on that ship, the crew was temporarily blinded for 10 to 15 seconds and the Chinese Coast Guard ship was moving closer, so the likelihood of an accident happening was very high according to the Coast Guard.
So, military-grade laser. Ano yung significance ng pag-describe dito as military grade?
Well, yung effect nito ay yun, exactly that what happened. May temporary blindness ng 10 to 15 seconds. It's intended to kind of interrupt someone from doing something, to deter them from whatever it is they're doing at the time. And at that time, the BRP Malapascua was in the West Philippine Sea acting as support for a resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal or Second Thomas Shoal. Yung Ayungin Shoal ay malapit lang sa Palawan, mga 105 nautical miles. And so, of course, at Ayungin Shoal, dun yung BRP Sierra Madre, which is an old Navy ship that's aground as a permanent outpost. So, the BRP Malapasco was acting as support for a Philippine Navy resupply mission to the ship.
Military-grade laser, pero yung mga Coast Guard vessels, mga civilian ships ito, hindi ba? Yung Chinese Coast Guard na gumagamit ng military-grade laser, may mga expert ba na nag-weigh in tungkol dyan at nag-criticize doon?
Actually, oo nga. Buti na raise mo yan kasi the significance of that is, if you recall, 2 years ago, it was around 2 years ago, when China passed a Coast Guard law allowing its Coast Guard vessels to use force and to be armed, and we're seeing the effects of that now. The Philippine Coast Guard isn't equipped with a laser. It doesn't have any arms or anything of that sort. But the Chinese Coast Guard does, and that makes the likelihood of any encounter or any force being used at sea higher. It makes the chances of intimidation more intense. And exactly that. They have military-grade lasers on board, whereas other Coast Guard ships, like the Philippines, doesn't.
Mm-hmm. And what did the experts like Justice Carpio say about this laser incident?
Well, Justice Carpio mentioned that it could be cause for invoking the Mutual Defense Treaty with the
Because
United States because it had done harm to crew that were on board. It could be considered a hostile act, but um, on the other side, you had voices from the Philippine government saying that it wouldn't be a commensurate response at this point in time. It would be too escalatory for that to happen. But I think significant pa rin yung point ni Justice Crappy because you see how, again, the intensity of China's aggressive actions is growing.
itong mga ganitong mga incident, syempre nag-fuel ito ng statement from China, exchange of statements between China, US, Philippines, China, Philippines, US. What are the challenges of covering something like this that erupts into a diplomatic incident already?
Well, I think first and foremost yung challenge sa mga ganitong incidents is that, well, let's just talk about this particular incident, no? The fact na a military-grade laser was involved, so figuring out why that is even considered provocative, which we explained earlier with the Coast Guard's account of what happened, what sets it apart from other incidents of harassment, and also just trying to explain and understand why it should matter for people who even for people who are so far away from the incident or who aren't on that ship. Aside from that, yun nga, making sense as well of all the statements that are coming in from different countries, why this particular incident is making them react the way they are. And aside from that, the other challenge I think in covering this is also just seeing how to push the story forward also because, well, let's face it, it's not the first time na China has done intimidating tactics, intimidating actions, aggressive actions in the West Philippine Sea. And so there's almost this cycle all the time of, okay, an incident happens, and then the Philippines will react and file a protest, and then China will respond, and then the other countries may or may not chime in on the incident. And so just seeing how to bring it forward past the he said, she said.
Alright, may raise lang akong issue. Dahil syempre, bilang journalist, ang inaasahan sa atin ng mga tao ay we have an objective stance. So, kung nagdabas ang statement ng Pilipinas, nagdabas ang statement ng China, ang US, automatic ba na naniniwala ka kaagad dun sa statement ng Pilipinas or do you give equal weight to the statement of China?
Well, I think we go back to what the facts are, right? So if the Philippines is saying something happened and there's evidence to prove it, that's a fact. If China says, well, China's response to this was that the Philippines was not telling the truth, you can't give equal weight to it because you mentioned that China denied the incident, but you can't give equal weight to it because the facts are already there bearing you out.
Where do you find your being Filipino in covering incidents like this?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, will there come a time that you would believe what China is saying or be convinced by China because the facts show that China is telling the truth. So, hindi ba there's always this struggle to will you be the cheerleader for your country?
Well, I think again, you go back to the facts, right? If that's also why we asked the Coast Guard, for example, so what does it mean if a military grade laser is used, and why is it so provocative this time, or why is it so destabilizing this time? You asked me where is my being Filipino in this. I think that, well, again, we go back to what the facts are, right? The Philippines also has a legal ruling on its side. And so there is basis to our claims. And of course, that's the truth. And that's what we're here to defend and bear out.
Well, the topic of our news break chat is lasers and the protection of Philippine waters. As a journalist, are you for the protection of Philippine
Yes.
waters? Why?
Because it's ours, and because the facts have borne us out. We have a legal ruling that's there to back us up. We have also, I mean, this is what, there are lives at stake here also when it comes to the issue, because there are officers in the Navy, there are people in the Coast Guard, officials in the Coast Guard who go out and risk their lives there every day. It's a source of food for us. It's also a source of potential energy for us. And so, of course, you defend it.
May magkasabi, hindi ka ba nagiging bias dahil dyan? What about China? China is asking for fairness. How can you give it to China? Will you give it to China, or how will you address that kind of concern?
I think you air their side, in that they say the Philippines is not telling the truth. They deny the incident, but also that, I mean, you give it space, but then just the commensurate space it needs. I mean, I would ask you the same question, right? Because you also used to cover foreign affairs. So how do you feel about the issue when things like this happen?
Magaling ka, ha? Binalik mo sa akin yung tanong, ha?
Hirap kasi yung mga tanong mo.
Well, that's weird for to come from me. That's a good question, but thank you for asking me. So I think the issue always is that are can journalists be truly objective? Di ba? It will always boil down to that question. And my answer always, I also teach a journalism class, is that we can never be objective in a philosophical sense, meaning that you really don't believe, or sorry, or that you're always in the center, or that your nationality, your religion, your political leanings will not color your reporting. Of course, those things will influence your reporting because you're a human being. So in covering things like this, the that laser incident, if I were covering it, of course, talagang namang meron sa journalist na teka, Pilipino ako eh. Hindi mo matatanggal yan na Pilipino din ako. But then, where does the objectivity come in? The objectivity comes in through the method. We subscribe to an objective method of reporting. So yun, sa mga viewers natin, yun yung mahalaga sa journalism. Objective method. The person cannot be objective because the person is a person colored by different influences, religion, nationality, political leanings, but the method is always objective. So I think that is where also Sophia is coming from. What you were saying a while ago about facts, correct, Sophia? The
Yeah.
facts, because we subscribe to an objective method, which is what? What are the methods? Can you give us the methods?
I mean, yeah, again, going back to the facts, asking the Coast Guard exactly what happened. I mean, even if it means them reiterating what was said in their statement. Asking questions, right? So, sir, I mean, asking questions. So, what does it mean if a military grade laser was used? Why is it so? Why is it not like other incidents before? And what was it like for the person out there? Because then that's also how you can double check what their statement says and not just take everything yeah, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, and another thing is that we can be a journalist can be pro-Filipino without being pro-government, correct? So there's the other layer of um, upholding the interests of the Filipino and upholding the interests of the Philippine government. Magkaiba yun. Diba? So these are Philippine waters. These things affect the ordinary Filipino. We cannot pretend, journalists cannot pretend that, we are not for the interest of the Filipino. We are objective. We are just reporting the facts. We are not robots. We are journalists and we are persons. But it's a different topic when you talk about the interests of government. Kasi ang mga yan ay pinatatakbo ng mga politiko. At ang mga politiko talagang, syempre, may mga mabubuting politiko, meron ding mga masasamang politiko. Maraming masasamang politiko na nagpapatakbo ng gobyerno at gusto lang talaga ng kapangyarihan at pera. So, minsan maganda sa mga politiko na maging kaalyado ng China dahil syempre, pagdating ng eleksyon, maraming mga kampi rin sa China ang nagpopondo ng campaign ng mga politikong pro-China. So, kumbaga, bahagi din yan. At maraming pera bumubuhos galing China, hindi ba, Sofia?
To that point, I think dun papasok din yung reporting on the government's response. If you're talking about being pro-Filipino and being different from being pro-government, let's just look at the response to this particular incident. Um, uh, what did the government do after? They filed a protest, a strong protest. The president summoned the Chinese ambassador, and so in that sense, it was a good response. The AFP also echoed the same message of the DFA and Malacanang. So that was a good response, right? But if you compare it to what might have happened in the previous administration, the previous Duterte administration, sa mga ibang incidents na nangyari na sa West Philippine Sea, we can look at Denver, for instance. If you remember yung Denver, yung that was in 2019 when 22 fishermen were abandoned after a Chinese boat hit their boat and rammed it and it sank and everything. And the government was doubting the account of their own fishermen who were there, who were out at sea. And so I think that's where the distinction of being what you mentioned about being pro-Filipino and being pro-government is seen, because the government responded by doubting the claim of the fishermen, going with China's claim, echoing China's version of events, and we call that out because that wasn't what the facts were, and that wasn't what the truth was.
Kasi ang gobyerno ni President Duterte ay masyadong pro-China naman. Masyadong pro-China. At syempre nabatikos din sila tungkol dyan, hindi ba? At yung Gemver, yan yung isa sa mga unang issue na kinover mo na foreign affairs related, correct?
Correct. After you. Yeah.
Yeah, marami kang mga memories dyan. So, ano yung mga similarities and differences nitong laser incident at saka Gemver?
I think similarity in the sense na, well, early days pa naman ng Marcos administration. But so far, ito yung pinaka-serious na incident, siguro, sa West Philippine Sea. Kasi may harm done to Filipinos who were out there at sea. Differences is that we were able to actually go out there to during covering Gemmer, we were able to go out to Mindoro, speak to the fishermen, try to get as close to the scene and imagine what it was like for them. Ito medyo dahil I guess government din, medyo guarded pa rin yung pagme-message or the information that's coming from them when it comes to let's say first-hand accounts of what the PCG crew went through, what they were feeling and all.
Now, maraming mga iba pang nangyari related to this, hindi related sa tawag dito. Itong laser incident, merong mga nangyari before it and after it na parang unrelated. Katulad nung biyahe ni President Marcos sa Japan, di ba? At saka yung EDCA developments. May nakikita ka bang common thread sa mga ito?
Right. I think yung common thing or the common thread in all of this is that China's actions are emphasizing having such a why the Philippines is so keen on strengthening partner or cooperation with Japan, strengthening cooperation with the US, strengthening cooperation with Australia. Yung Australia is the latest because their defense minister was just here yesterday. And so I think, yeah, again, China's actions are emphasizing why the Philippines is moving in that direction, why there's such a if it feels like things are happening so fast, it's because we also are playing catch up after 6 years from Duterte, where we didn't do anything. We decided to the government wanted to be friendly towards China, and so we um, kept quiet about any sort of cooperation, tried not to make it too overt, tried not to disappoint the president about it. But now, um, be, because things haven't stopped, you've gone the friendly route and you've tried to see if it would help your
Sorry.
if it would help the Philippines case in the West Philippine Sea. And obviously, being friendly to China didn't do anything.
Mm.
Nandun pa rin yung mga Chinese boats, both Coast Guard, Navy, militia. Um, they're there almost every day now. And so we didn't gain anything by with the government being friendly towards China. And so now the harassment continues, and that's why I mean that's it's just emphasizing um, more why the Philippines is partnering with the US, partnering with Japan, partnering with Australia, and partnering with more countries to come in the future, because um, it's also part of how we defend our sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea.
So partnerships. Why are partnerships important in diplomacy in general? Diplomacy and security.
Yeah. Well, I think for a country like the Philippines, it's not a military power the same way the US is. It's not. It hasn't grown its military the same way China has, and so we have limits as a country, right? As a country like the Philippines, and so we recognize that you can't go at it alone. You need people to help you. You need friends, and um, friends whose interests are overlap with yours, and those friends happen to be countries like the US, Japan, and Australia, countries that also experience China's growingly aggressive tactics and growingly intimidatory tactics.
Mhm. Sophia, where do you see this moving forward?
I think what's really interesting to me in all of this so far is the government's response to it, because over the last 6 years we've gotten so used to there not being a reaction, or worse than there not being a reaction, the government siding with China when it comes to harassment in the West Philippine Sea. And so I think the Philippines, well, fingers crossed, I think the Philippines is starting to take back some of the moral high ground that it has. That it's always, I mean, that was there for the taking after the Hague ruling was handed down, but downplayed. And now we're starting to take back some of the moral high ground and take back and assume some of the leadership in the fight, in the fight for the West Philippine Sea. And I think that's important because that's also what a lot of countries were waiting for, right? I mean, you covered the filing of the Philippines' decision to file a case
Correct.
against China, and a lot a lot of countries supported the Philippines, maybe not as vocally as they are now, but a lot of the support was also lost when the Philippines decided to shelve the ruling. And so now, because the Philippines is taking the lead again, and then everyone else can follow, because they see that the Philippines is willing to fight for what's theirs.
Is Marcos pro-China?
I I I think I don't know. What do you think? I don't know if it's too soon to answer that. I think he's definitely
What do the facts show?
I think if we look at his track decision so far, he's leaning more towards he's more aligned with U.S. interests in that he's allowed the U.S. to have more access to key military sites, security sites here in the country. He seems to be maybe it's also generational. He seems to take the um, same preference for the U.S. as his father, the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos, did. Also, when it comes to the West Philippine Sea, remember it was also Marcos who declared Kalayaan Island Group to be part of Philippines territory, and so he seems to be aligned with what his father's legacy was, at least. And I think he's trying to play that. I mean, like all presidents, right? They're trying to play the balancing act between with the U.S. and China.
Kung si Duterte, walang balancing yun.
I mean, trying to play the balance. Yeah, trying to play the balancing act.
The bureaucrats under Duterte, they play the balancing act. But Duterte, no balancing act at all.
No balancing act at all. So now you see that balancing act going all the way to the top, and um, it's it's new to us in a way because we haven't seen. It's new to us in a way because before Duterte, we had Aquino who filed the case, so that was one extreme, and then and relations were at its lowest point with China at that time, and in Duterte's time, the relations with the U.S. were at its lowest point as well. But now you kind of, I mean, a lot of people see Marcos as a middle ground, um, and yeah, when it comes to balancing the U.S. and China.
Well, of course, dapat lang alam siguro ni President Marcos yung halaga at kapangyarihan ng Amerika dahil nung panahon ng kanyang tatay, bukod sa nung sa simula sinuportahan nga ng Amerika si President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. sa huli. At ngayon,
withdraw
Feb 23, Feb 25 is the 37th anniversary of the EDSA People Power Revolution, where we know that the US played a key role. And of course, maybe a second Marcos president wouldn't want to get to earn the ire of America again.
I think yun din yung I think one thing that hasn't changed is that we all countries still need each other. Marcos needs things from the US. The US also needs things from the Marcos administration, and so we're seeing that we're still seeing that play out until now.
My last question, Sophia. In covering diplomatic and security incidents like this, what drives you
Um,
as a journalist? What makes your work relevant?
well, yun nga, we go back to the fact that, I mean, presidents can do things like summon, people working in offices can do things like filing protests. But I think go back to the people who come face to face with it every day. So that's one thing that drives me. Just trying to understand more what it's like for them and appreciating the role that they play as well. Telling their story, and also the fact that I think what another thing that drives me is we still don't fully appreciate what the West Philippine Sea means to us as a country. Aside from, of course, there's the food. There's the fact that it's a source of food for us. There's a food security issue. There's an energy issue to it. But I think sometimes we forget that, and I think that's one thing that drives me to keep reminding people that it's not just something that's far away from us, but yeah, touches us every day.
So, what does the West Philippines mean for ordinary Filipinos?
I think
What should it mean for all of us?
I want to hear what you think it means as
no,
well.
you raised that question.
I think it's a question of identity.
Identity.
Also.
What about identity?
It's will you allow somebody will you allow somebody to bully you and take away what's yours? Is that who you are as a Filipino? Yeah, that's one thing. I think it's also a question of not just those are the water there belongs to us and everything. It's a question of identity, right? Who you are as a Filipino, standing up for defending yourself, defending yourself, defending those who are out there, those who risk their lives there every day. I think that's yeah. I think it's not just. I think it's also a question of identity.
Thank you for raising that. And to add to that, the title of our episode is Lasers and the Protection of Philippine Waters. Aside from it being a question of identity, I think it's also a question of dignity. Our dignity as a country, our dignity as Filipinos. And on that note, I'd like to thank you, Sophia, and I'd like to thank you, our viewers, for joining us. Salamat, Sophia, at salamat sa lahat. Ako po si Paterno S. Makel. Magkita-kita ulit tayo sa susunod na episode ng Newsbreak Chats.